to the Power of One. Today, we're going to speak about a topic that is very, very serious: child abuse and child neglect. Please understand it is not okay to inflict harm upon any child at any time. Today, I will be joined with Vickie Melvin from PCA. Welcome to the show, Vickie. Vickie, please tell me where you work, what your role is, and how long you've been employed there.
Sure. I work at the Philadelphia Children's Alliance, and my role, I am the Director of Program Practice and Quality Improvement. I've been there for 9 years, but I've been in child welfare for 32 years.
That's a long time.
It's a
And
long
I
time.
thought my job was hard, working with victims of crime, of all crimes, and now just working with co-homicide survivors, which is hard. And
Mhm.
Vickie, you help children that have been victims of sexual abuse.
Primarily, yes, primarily sexual abuse. The Philadelphia Children's Alliance is the child advocacy center for Philadelphia. And so our forensic interviewers and family advocates provide services to the children who primarily have allegations of sex abuse, but we also interview children who have extreme physical abuse, are witnesses to fatalities or near fatalities, also some abductions or near abductions as well.
Wow. Now, tell me the services that are offered at PCA.
So we primarily provide forensic services for the Philadelphia Department of Human Services as well as the police department. So that responsibility is interviewing the children in a safe and nurturing environment, providing a neutral question and answer is fact finding to get the information that the investigators need to investigate these allegations. But we also provide um, victim support to the entire family, whether it's medical exams for all the children that are involved, referring families for mental health services, but we also support them for court. We refer in-house to our in-house mental health program, but also we partner with many of the mental health agencies throughout the city of Philadelphia and refer them for mental health services as well.
Okay. So, reporting child abuse or neglect, how can someone do that?
The best way to do that, I would tell everyone, is to call Childline. And that number is 1-800-932-0313. And it's important to make that report. You don't have to know exactly what happened. If you suspect child abuse, you can make a report. Anyone who is working directly with children, we're considered mandated reporters. So we don't have the option to think about a report. We are required to just report. I always tell everyone, just report the abuse. You don't have to worry about what happens with it. Those reports go directly to our local Philadelphia Department of Human Services, and then also to the police district, primarily Special Victims Unit at the Philadelphia Police Department. And the investigators handle everything. We don't have to know all the details. You just have to suspect abuse.
So, can anyone make that call?
Yes, anyone can make that call.
Okay. So, when someone, tell me something, is there a difference between neglect and child abuse? And do you think people would hesitate to make a call because they're not too sure when to call?
Sure, people are always hesitant. And, neglect is still a form of abuse. Any of those situations that happen to children that deprive them of their safety or well-being or food or harm them in any way, physical punishment, that's all considered abuse. Even sexual abuse. We might not always have marks or bruises behind a sexual abuse. It's ongoing, but they still are affect children physically as well as emotionally. And so you don't have to know what happened. If you suspect, that a child is being harmed in any way, I always tell everyone, just call Childline and let the professionals handle it.
Okay. What would you say some signs are for neglect, child abuse, or even sexual abuse for people
Mhm.
to look out for?
I always tell people to look out for the behaviors more so than marks or bruises, because there isn't always that visual sign. But you would see a child that may seem withdrawn or timid or afraid. Children that, in terms of neglect, they look like they're hungry, or they even tell you that they're hungry, or they're not clean, not properly dressed. They, it's winter time and they have no coat, or there's the shoes are torn. Um, there's so many things, and even with sexual abuse, you're not going to necessarily see these signs, but kids who are emotionally withdrawn, very angry, depressed, um, acting out. A lot of children display what's going on with them in behaviors versus, just coming right out and saying, this is happening to me, or you can actually see physical signs.
You being in victim services, just like myself, there has been times where parents have been faced with some difficult times. So say there's a shooting, their child is shot or shot and killed. And as we know, relocation is hard to do for some families. Vickie, what about that mother and father who cannot be relocated because they may not meet the requirements and they're afraid to be home? And it just so happens that they are probably sleeping out in their car with their child. That's not child abuse. It's
Mm-hmm.
not neglect.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens if someone calls the police on them? Those are situations that would break our heart, where
Right.
a child is removed from the home. Can you speak on that very important issue?
Yeah, that is I think, one of the biggest challenges in this field, because we don't have enough resources for those families that need housing, or they, need a place to stay, or they're displaced because of the abuse. And families are often torn apart. But I can honestly say, I think that the Philadelphia Department of Human Services has made a lot of great strides in trying to keep families together. And so the first thought is not to remove the child. The first thought is to try to brainstorm with that caregiver. Where can you go? What can we do to help and to support? And if there was anything that I would advocate for, would be for legislators to think more about resources that are available to families that are displaced due to abuse, whether, even if it's domestic violence. We need more resources in this city for people who find themselves in that situation.
I agree. Now, does PCA help young children who lost a mother or a father and they're in need of therapy?
So most of our referrals come directly through children that are referred to us for that forensic interview. However, any child that may not come for an interview, but they have experienced victimization through abuse, we do provide victim services and connect them. We have amazing partnerships with mental health providers all across the city, who have entered into an agreement with us that we have the ability to just reach directly out to them and make referrals for mental health services. So it's important for children who have experienced abuse, regardless of what abuse it is, to receive trauma-focused treatment. And that usually comes in the form of trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. But there are many other modalities that are available to families. And so most of our partners, we help to support them in getting their clinicians trained, so that they can respond to our families.
That's excellent. What about those families who need help and they do not speak English? How do they report, or how do they go about getting services?
I like to tell everyone that if you were to go to DHS, which is the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services, so dhs.pa.gov, at the top in the very corner, there's a translate box that you can click. And so instructions automatically are translated into whatever language they need. I believe there are like 55 different languages available. And so it's important for anyone, they just utilize that. We have at PCA most of our materials translated into Spanish, because that's what the families that we primarily work with, and we have bilingual staff across all of our departments. And so we really encourage people to, even go to our website, which is philachildren'salliance.org, but also just to know that dhs.pa.gov, they have tons of resources, and there's even a link for Keep Kids Safe. And you just click on that link and it gives you all types of information to support the work.
That's excellent. Do you find that people of different races do not always report because of their culture or the shame that it will bring on their culture?
Oh, most definitely. It's important to report abuse because we can't stop perpetrators. Perpetrators are good at what they do. They groom children, they groom caregivers into believing that they're a safe adult when they're not. And so there are many cultures that do not disclose. Of course, African Americans are overrepresented within our system, and those are the cases that we see primarily, but we do see all races. And some people refuse because it's in their culture, it is not okay to talk about what happened. Or you have some that believe that some of those behaviors are just normal and it's okay for an adult to abuse a child. But we're here to dispel that.
Okay. Now, what age group does PCA see or serve?
Sure. We primarily see, I would say, age 3 to up to 18. Usually the child has to be verbal to receive a forensic interview. But if the child is not verbal, we're providing victim services to the child and the family.
So I was going to ask about the children who have developmental delays. So for PCA, is the cutoff age 18? But if they have developmental delays, does it extend beyond the age of 18?
So we do see any child over the age of 18, even if they have a developmental delay. Our purpose is to ensure that they are receiving a child-friendly or developmentally friendly forensic interview. So all of our forensic interviews are trained to work with children who may have delays, including autism or any. We also interview children who may be hearing impaired as well. So we would get an interpreter for them as well.
Okay. So reporting for child abuse and sexual abuse, is it the same number?
It's the exact same number.
Okay, give us that number again, Vickie.
No problem. It's 1-800-932-0313. And that's Childline.
Okay. So tell me something. Can a child call?
Yes.
And
a child can report
that they're being abused?
They can call. And if they're young, I would say if they're probably under 13, the Childline operator will help to connect them quickly to the department or the Children and Youth Agency in their county.
So if a child that age, say over 13?
Yes, more than likely. Okay. Yeah, they'll take that report. Mm-hmm.
What if a child calls that's over 13 and they say that something's taking place in their home?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how that would be handled, and will they be returned back to their home? Like, is it immediate services available for them?
So for all children, if the abuse occurred in the home, the offending adult would more than likely be asked to leave the home. And that's when I was talking a little earlier about families being displaced. Sometimes you have families living in the home that belongs to the abuser. So then the family has to leave the home. But usually during an investigation, the abuser is asked to leave the home. And if for some reason the child cannot safely be returned home, they do look for alternative care for the child, and family is always first.
Okay. So with every case of child abuse, is DHS involved?
Yes, well, let me say this. If the abuse occurred within the home or with a family member, a close family member, like a parent, a sibling, um, or an uncle, aunt, grandparent, that relationship, I think it's the third degree of consanguinity, um, DHS would be involved. If it's even if it's a paramour that is in the home, DHS would be involved. Any household member that's over the age of 14, DHS would be involved. If the perpetrator is not a household member, then law enforcement would be involved. If it's a perpetrator over the age of 14 and a household member, you will have a dual investigation. So both police and DHS are involved.
For the child who was sexually abused or who suffered neglect, say at one hand of the parent and the other parent did not know about it,
Mm-hmm.
does PCA have services for the parent that becomes
Mm-hmm.
aware of this abuse, of this neglect? Because I can just imagine that could tear somebody up, because we're supposed to protect our children.
Right.
So do you have resources for the parent that are going through something, because it's traumatic for them also when they
Yes,
know that their child has been hurt?
for sure. And that caregiver who did not cause the abuses are non-offending caregiver. And so PCA, we actually run a caregiver support group for those caregivers. And it's a great opportunity not only for them to feel the support, but to gain additional information, but also to know that they're not alone. So there are other caregivers who are part of this group, and they have a chance to come together weekly and to discuss, all aspects of what they are experiencing and what what the next steps are going to be. I always say to everyone, kids who come into PCA, you would be surprised at how few of them are or how many of them rather are so collected, and they seem, they're ready to tell their story and they're not so emotionally torn. But the caregivers are the ones that struggle the most. They struggle with feeling guilty. They struggle with, you know, feeling like they didn't do all that they could possibly do. And we always tell them, you can't blame yourself.
Right.
Everyone has to know perpetrators are good at what they do.
Yeah.
Their job is to deceive everyone involved. And so you often can't see, someone's, deceptive ways. They know how to hide it.
And it is so heartbreaking. So Vickie, I want to thank you so much for joining me, but please give that number again. If anyone needs to report child abuse or child neglect, Vickie, please give us that number one more time.
I will. We encourage you to report any suspected abuse to Childline, and that number is 1-800-923-0313. I just want to say April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, and so if you in any way would love to have someone come out and talk to you or your group about how to keep kids safe, we provide child sex abuse training through a program called Stewards of Children. You can reach me at Melvin at philachildren'salliance.org.
Vickie, the number that you gave out, can people call that number 24 hours a day, 7 days a
20
week?
Yes, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Thank you so much, Vickie.
You're so
I really
welcome.
appreciate what you do, and stay on the battlefield because our babies need you. Thank you so much for joining me today, Vickie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. Please understand, inflicting harm against any child is a crime. If you know of any children that are in harm's way, that have been neglected or abused, please call the Child Helpline. Thank you for joining me today.